J.D. Robb's In Death series.
Like that.
I mean, there's not really a happily ever after for even work at the beginning, you know, but you're getting that resolution of whatever mystery they're working on, whatever case they're working on.
That was going to be my next question, actually, is with all the variation stories in urban fantasy and romantic comedies, does the level of the happy ever after depict, is there a certain level of happy ever after that a reader expects, and can you get away with sliding that up and down a little? Like, does it have to be happily ever after married and expecting babies with a white picket fence, or can you get away with they're happy for now, we'll see what happens later?
I don't do that with mine. It's there happily ever after. It doesn't have to have a wedding at the end, or because I've got my 18th book just came out on my book series, so all of my books have to be really different from one another, you know. So sometimes they're married, sometimes they're just mated. They're wolves. They have to be mated if they're going to be consummated. They're mated for life. But it just depends. And sometimes I'll have like an epilogue and they'll say something about, well, you know, she's pregnant or whatever. So, but it's not, you know, like, well, this book, you know, it's got to be this book. It has to be happily ever after.
Since I write communities in the world building, I'll do cameos where you will see couples from other books and how they're getting along, and how the new couples will interact sometimes with the old characters and the old couple. So you see this couple's doing well. She's mad at her husband right now, you know, for something small, but they'll resolve it. So you will see life as it goes on for the characters in someone else's book. Because it's all like my Hallie Shifter series is all in a small town. So you'll see Max and Emma from way back in 2008. You'll see them in Bare Necessities, and you'll see them in Sinful. If I continue my Heart's Desire series in a new series, because the brothers are done, the king of the wizards will be mentioned, and whether or not he's had children yet, and how happy he is with his wife. So you will see, I love that. Diana Palmer does it really well. You'll see little bits and pieces of other characters' lives and how they've continued their story. So I wanted to incorporate that into mine. So you will see how their lives are going. Because you know it keeps going.
I actually have it both ways. I have two of my books that have the marriage and the children at the end, but then I have my trilogy, which the first book cliffhangs almost, not in a bad sense, but with the couples being happy, and then with the promise of happiness for another couple that I'm introducing. They've been introduced in the first book. I'm going to take that back, but now it's they didn't know each other, meaning they had never met before until the end of until the very end. So I do that both ways. Do I think that happily ever after has to be marriage and kids? No. Happily ever after for me has to be that the good guy won, and that there's some sort of assurance that either they're together or that there's a promise that they're going to be together.
The happily ever after really, I think, does depend on what kind of book it is. I read everything except horror, pretty much, and I don't read mainstream because I don't trust it to make me happy at the end of the book. There's a series that I won't name because I don't want to be perceived as insulting the author, but I did read the whole series. The first trilogy, everything worked out well in terms of the good guys win, and they defeat the bad guys, and we're going forward in the right direction. But my favorite character died to make that happen. And so I really did have to stop and think, am I going to read these other books? Is he going to do this to me again? And the answer is yes, he is going to do this to you again. And so I think a lot of readers have limited tolerance for seeing their favorite characters die. The late Marion Zimmer Bradley, who edited her own fantasy magazine, in her guidelines said, "Do not make me identify with a character and then kill that character." She was pretty blatant about it. Just right out there, don't do that. So I do think it depends on what kind of book it is and what the reader expectation is, because we're in the business of satisfying reader expectation when we come right down to it. Yes.
I agree with what you said. There are varying levels of happily ever after. I've read some Janet Ivanovich. She had the one for the money. They're funny, and they have the happily ever after that she catches the bad guy. But she's got two guys in every book that she walks her back and forth.
Ranger and Joe.
And by the I think I'm on 21 or something.
Yeah, I think 21.
Big one. So I like happily ever after, but as long as as a reader, as long as each book has some, they caught the bad guy, or the world hasn't, and whatever it is that they're fighting or they're trying to help get better, as long as there's some closure to that, and some illusion that the couple will either end up together or they're committed together.
Okay.
And then I can go to a second and third book. But if I don't know that the couples even likes each other, I don't know that I'll read a second book.
I have two questions for you. First, which would you pick, Ranger or Joe?
Oh my God, that's hard.
I know, right?
It depends on the situation.
See, now you know where Janet is, right?
I understand, but
Yeah.
I'm a veteran, so I'd probably go with Ranger.
Yeah, well.
But unfortunately, Ranger is not the commitment type. So
Well,
if I
but
want,
are you sure about that?
he's already committed to her.
And the second thing is, would you keep reading if she was not this kind of single, wild,
Probably not.
harebrained?
I
Because
don't
she
know,
is a
because
little.
she's pretty crazy on
She
her.
is.
I mean, if she stopped being a bounty hunter, I'd probably stop reading because it wouldn't be so funny. But I don't know how the girl can even have car insurance. As many cars that she's had blown up. I'm just saying, as a reader, I like some kind of happily ever after. It doesn't have to be the couple gets married, but.
Well, what,
She ends up with one of the guys at the end of each book, which is kind of
Yeah.
working it out.
but let's go back. I mean, how do you feel? I mean, do you end your books with a solid, or do you have a graduation? Great.
What I was going to say was
Gradient.
the last question, I guess that plays in, is that it depends on my characters, because there are some characters who are clearly the woman and the man, they have something in them that they need an engagement, or they need something and then there's others. I mean, the majority of mine do not end in weddings and babies. It's you know about it down the road, but there is a level of commitment. I think they do end in engagement, and actually I think there's a wedding in the epilogue. But this one, the wedding isn't until the very end of the third book, and we get to see that play out. So again, it's what the couples, it's where they are. If you have a couple who's in her sophomore year of college, I mean, you're not going to see the same ending as you would a woman who is 40-some years old and having her second chance at love. That your expectations are going to be different than they would be in real life. So I guess that's one.
I honestly think it depends on genre for the one-point book. What is the question that you posed at the beginning of your story as a writer? What is the barrier? I usually end up with two characters, and then I say, what is the barrier for them to be together? What is the emotional barrier? Outside plot, that'll happen eventually, but what is the internal issue with this person to let down their guard and love this other person? And at the end of the book, if you have a continuing couple, what is the issue that's resolved at the end of the first book? What is the issue that's resolved at the end of the second book? Your emotional issue. Why do I want to find out if they resolve the next emotional issue? But I think that slapping on a happily ever after that they don't feel like they emotionally earned, I think that if you look at a book that you felt like, oh, that's nice, and you put it aside and you can't remember for the life of you what you just read, I think that becomes because you're emotionally unfulfilled by the end. I always use this as an example. The movie City of Angels, I know, emotionally devastating. And so everybody went to see it and they hated it. And I went to see it and I was so overwhelmingly moved by this movie. I'm gonna spoil it for all of you. Angel falls in love with a woman, becomes human, gives up everything to be human so he can be with her. There's been a blissful 2 days together. She goes out and gets killed on the road. And there's a moment in this, it's a terrible movie, but and you're like, God, this is a ridiculous movie. And there's a moment where he's weeping and his friend, who's an angel, comes. And his friend says, would you do it all over again, knowing you only had 36 hours? And he says, yes. And I was like, that is the most romantic thing I have ever seen in my life. And so, is it a happy ending? Well, sort of, because he got his emotional fulfillment and she got her emotional fulfillment. Now, they didn't guarantee it was 70 years. It was 36 hours. But if you look at the emotional fulfillment of that story, I mean, if it had ended with them buying a fence and a ring and a dog, you would have been like, I think there was a movie with that guy and his leather jacket and his angel. I don't really remember, the dog was cute. Like that, you don't have that emotional, like that moment is tattooed in my head. That's emotionally fulfilling. You might disagree with the writer, but like Nicholas Sparks, I don't think you want to go to his house and punch him in the face.
Yeah,
I did. But that's not emotionally. Nicholas Sparks, you don't feel emotionally fulfilled. You're like, oh, I care, and they broke down the barriers, and then a wave comes and takes somebody off the shore, and you're like, I don't actually know what that's a metaphor for. You know.
And I think it's a difference because I felt the same way you did about City of Angels, and I think it was because you needed that huge ending after that build-up, and I don't like being manipulated, and I guess that's what I feel about it. I feel like I've been manipulated all the way through, and I don't like that. As a reader, I don't like it as a viewer. I look back at, this is really, really old school, and probably a lot of you haven't seen it, but Love Story. You remember Love Story?
Yes.
I mean, that didn't bother me. I'm very sad what happened to Ally McGraw at the end, clearly, but the way we were, right? Going back again. I'm sad about it, but it still felt like it was a good story. It was a good one.